that noise.
Okay. Next question. Ian.
All right, just one thing. It's not so much that I disagree with your assessment of computer games as an art form or their value or, in fact, their potential. What I don't see as clearly following is that they will necessarily displace other forms of entertainment, or that they necessarily compete directly with them. I mean, when I stand in the British Museum and look at Turner's paintings, I don't want to interact with that. I want to look at it. If I go to a movie, I want to watch that movie. There are times when I would prefer not to interact with something. Yes. There are times when I prefer to do it. I would tend to rather look at our industry as one where we're presenting people with a different form of entertainment. This is a new experience. You can, instead of being always frustrated being unable to interact with a movie, you can choose whether you wish to interact or whether you don't. But I don't see it as being a replacement.
Yes.
Or that anything else will fall away because of it. I don't think there will be necessarily any effect upon reading or viewing television or looking at paintings.
That is exactly where I have overstated my case. By asserting the primacy of interactive entertainment, I have implied the exclusion of all other forms, and on that point, I'm wrong.
And I don't agree necessarily with primacy either.
I think it's primacy.
Well, yes, because, and I would agree because I like it the most, but I don't necessarily believe that my views are going to be everybody else's, and that each person is going to judge a particular art form in terms of what he gets out of it, not necessarily what you as the creator of it put into it. Yeah. And so that, I mean, everyone's got to look at those things as they see fit, but it's a separate thing, not a replacement for the others.
Okay, yeah, you got me there, you're right. Eric?
I will agree with you that interactive art, however it takes shape, is going to take some of the time that we spend appreciating the passive arts away. However, in stating that there's a tax on art that is delivered to a passive audience and saying that this is the penalty for doing it, I think you neglected a trade-off that we make, which is if you do great art and you are delivering it to a passive audience, you are delivering art greatness undiluted by mediocrity. If in the future a interactive Beethoven figures out some way to interact with you and create a Ninth Symphony, the odds are that his audience, each person, is not equally as skilled as Beethoven, an acknowledged genius of music. And therefore, while we are engaging more of his attention, because that person, his audience, is able to interact with him, we are reducing the caliber of the Ninth Symphony thus produced.
You're right, that's a good point. Dave?
No, I disagree, because in Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, I don't know music, so when I listen to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, I go, da-da-da-da, it's a neat piece of music. So I have my mediocre. See, I don't even know which one it is. I didn't have my mediocre. In this case, there's my mediocrity, which lessens Beethoven. Okay? So if you're a real music lover, you get a lot more out of it. Beethoven's greater. So it's just the same deal. It's not a wholly separate thing in an interactive thing, because there's the person who's watching it who affects it.
Yeah, but Dave,
music is interactive.
Dave, any limitations that you say you have in appreciating it should not detract from the greatness of the work.
It doesn't. But it does detract from the greatness of my perception, which is what you're talking about in an interactive game.
But Beethoven cannot do anything about any lacks that you have in appreciation. All he can do is give you the great art and say, but game design is the same problem. If you can't appreciate my game design, no matter how interactive it is, you're stuck, and there will be people who don't appreciate it, no matter how wonderful it is.
See, I'm just saying
I think that's something that interactive and passive entertainment have in common.
Clyde?
Yeah, Chris, I'm going to give you an opportunity to pontificate. Here's the... No, here's the question. Without opening a debate about whether a game can have artistic elements and the process being artistic, do you see a time when we'll talk about interactive art as a form and interactive play as something different?
Yes. In fact, the best model that I can think of for this is on Star Trek Next Generation, the holodeck, where the holodeck is interactive play going on. However, what is very interesting to me is the holodeck has gone through an evolution. As the screenwriters have figured out the potentials of that technology, they started off with it as being primarily a toy. You go in, there's an environment, gee, pretty brooks, little birds flying through the air, isn't this nice? And as they've evolved, they've made it more of a game. They brought in characters who anticipate your actions. The characters become the centerpiece. The last holodeck one I saw had Moriarty in it, and this was conflict, this was game, this was intense interaction going on between these characters and Moriarty. In other words, looking at Star Trek Next Generation, we see interactive play initially, but as they learned it, they got up to something more like an interactive game. Does this mean the game is better than the play? I don't think so, but I was struck by that evolution. Cliff.
Actually, Brenda was next.
Oh, I'm sorry, Brenda.
Yeah, you put a lifesaver in my mouth.
I was just going to say, it seems to me you have this observation about conversation that you started your talk with.
Yeah.
And it may be the difference between sort of mass passive arts like music and movies and books and interactive media that we're talking about today is sort of the scale of the conversation. For instance, the theater is a conversation with the culture, plays that get written in the 20th century. And in the Restoration period, this is even more obvious. People went to the theater every week to see what the playwright of the week had to say about what was going on in London society. Here we have the opportunity for art that has private conversations with individuals. And that is a whole new ballgame, because we haven't had that opportunity before. The only people who've been able to do that were Borges and Louis XIV, who could hire an artist to come and have a conversation with him by painting his portrait, for instance. And that, I think, is a really fascinating aspect of what we're doing that we don't think about very much. It's kind of art perspective that might be useful.
In the 19th century, any educated person knew how to play at least one instrument and draw. And that is interactive art.
Yeah, I agree.
You pick up some sheet music, you play it, you start looking at it, you start bringing voices out, you start putting voices in the background, you do some drawings, you see somebody else's drawings, you start incorporating their stuff into your work. Before we got stupid, we had interactive art. Everyone in the society was expected to know enough about these things that it was an interaction.
I do not.
Not possibly more than 3% of any European community. Everyone would have, if you're going to include what was a typical European society, very many people wouldn't have ever had access to a crayon of any type. Never would have had access to any form of artificial.
I was saying educated people. I'm not talking about the. I'm not talking about the 75% of London.
White people.
I'm not talking about the 75% of London that was starving in
The
1850.
chair recognizes Mr. Van.
Thank you. Everyone knows how to write. That doesn't make books interactive, say fiction, or interactive, nor can everybody write a story. I don't quite see where you're coming. What the point is that everybody can do pretty much anything. No matter what even if they're not talented, they can still take a shot at it. It's not in relation to what we're talking about here, in the sense of once it's put down, once it's done, once you've created and it's over, it's like software now. I mean, it's like people look at it and if they can continue to, just like anything, you can continue with it. You can reshoot a new story again off a film. You can re-record the Beatles. You can do whatever you want. But once it's down, once it's recorded, so look at it. And it's your decision to do something. Again, that's just reality. It's not really what we're saying.
Here's the same thing. Who's going to win first? Is Hollywood going to add interaction, or are we going to add Hollywood?
I think the interactive stories that we're talking about, where people look and read other things, are just as interactive as the plays in the Restoration period. That is not at all. Because the plays in the Restoration period, you went, you watched, you took in what happened, but you didn't have an option to change that. You didn't have any way to react back to it. So the stories you read, you take in what you got, you write a story. I think they're the same model. There's no interaction there at all.
Well, Tim, the point was that, Lady Fubar has an affair on Wednesday, and on Saturday it showed up on the stage.
I agree, but the people who are experiencing that don't have any interaction back to it.
Right.
Cliff.
This is a variation of the first point we're talking about. I want to ask, how many people have seen the play Tamara in Los Angeles? Yeah. Not very many. It's a play which you get to in this big American Legion building, and all this, and it's set up like a house or a mansion, and the actors are actually acting in the correct rooms, and you have a choice as an audience to follow them or not. So the husband goes one way, the wife goes the other way, and half the group goes with the husband, half the group goes with the wife. And it's a whole interact. It's not It's not interactive in the sense that you really have no control.
Like info comics.
Yeah, well, you have no control.
Exactly.
Except successful.
I don't understand the idea. The play doesn't change because of you, but you get to choose where you go. Now, I was just wondering, I can't go to that. I've gone to that play like 5 times, but that's enough. I like to see other plays where I can just sit back and let them tell to me. So the point I'm making is interactivity. How much do you always want to have strong interactivity? You can't play this unless I grab you and you're going to come interact with me. Don't people, when you were going to a museum, for some people it's relaxing. They want to have they're interacting very strongly at a very subtle mind level with the paintings, but they don't have to get an argument with it. They can just watch it. In other words, isn't interactivity that's always going to be demanding, the hands coming out of the screen, grabbing me by the neck? Won't that be tiring sometimes after a while?
That presumes that the human mind is basically lazy. A proposition I reject. I believe that people are more resigned than lazy. The guy comes home from work, flops down, and grabs a beer and chips and watches reruns of Laverne and Shirley. I reject the notion that he does it because he's a dullard. I believe he does that because everything he's experienced has told him to be passive. If we give people good, active entertainment, I think they'll rise to the occasion. It's a wild guess.
Well, they get tired of it.
I was a teacher.
I know.
I was a teacher for a number of years.
People, though.
There are 3 plays called Northern Conquest by Alan Atwood. The same play in 3 rooms. And when you see it over 3 nights, you can see somebody leaves one room and comes into another. That's an interesting piece of work, but it's also